I still remember the night I met Adrian. His smile was sharp enough to cut through the dim glow of the ballroom chandeliers, and his voice carried the kind of practiced warmth that made strangers trust him instantly. I was 31, already wealthy beyond my own comprehension thanks to the inheritance my father had left me, and yet I felt untethered, almost invisible in a room full of men who only saw numbers when they looked at me. But Adrian looked at me as though I were not a balance sheet, but a living flame. He asked me to dance. I agreed, though I had sworn not to let another opportunist near my heart. His touch lingered at the small of my back, careful yet assertive, like he already knew my body would memorize him. When he spun me across polished floors, whispers followed us, and for once I enjoyed being the subject of speculation. That night I brought him home. I told myself it was impulsive, just a fling, nothing more. But mornings stretched into afternoons, and afternoons bled into week. He filled my quiet mansion with music, laughter, and the wild chaos of lust. His ambition thrilled me. He spoke of ventures, investments, dreams so vivid I wanted to believe in them. For the first time since money had claimed me, I felt wanted not for my wealth but for the hunger I inspired in another human being. Still, shadows crept in early. Adrian's eyes often wandered when he thought I wasn't watching. He loved beautiful things, not just me, paintings, cars, jewelry, and people. Especially people. I brushed it off as harmless vanity, the kind every handsome man carries like an accessory. What mattered, I told myself, was the way he returned to me each night, breathless, feverish, whispering my name as though I were the only woman alive. We married in spring, beneath white magnolias blooming against the sky. I signed no prenuptial agreement. I thought love was stronger than paperwork. Guests raised crystal glasses, and my fortune quietly became ours. Everyone said we looked perfect together. Me, radiant in silk, him, bold in tailored black. A photograph of us from that day still hangs in my study, though sometimes I wonder if the smile he wore was real or simply rehearsed for the camera. Our honeymoon was fire. He devoured me with the urgency of a starving man, and I surrendered gladly. Yet even then, I noticed the way he checked his phone when he thought I slept. I ignored it. Desire makes fools of us all, and I was drunk on desire. Looking back, I realized the warning signs were not subtle. They were painted across every kiss, every late-night absence, every suspicious credit card charge. But I didn't want truth. I wanted heat, laughter, and the illusion that someone could love me for myself, not for the empire I carried in my name. And so I loved him, fiercely, blindly, until the day his love turned into theft. I discovered the first crack in our perfect picture on a Tuesday evening. The rain had been relentless all day, and I decided to surprise Adrian at his office with dinner. I carried his favorite bottle of wine, a foolish grin on my lips, already rehearsing how I'd tease him for working too hard. But when I opened the door, I found him leaning too close to his secretary, whispering something that made her laugh in a way no professional laugh should sound. He sprang up, too quickly, as though guilty hands had been caught mid-crime. "Darling, what are you doing here?" he asked, smoothing his shirt like I was an intruder rather than a wife. His words were warm, but his eyes flickered with irritation. I wanted to scream, to hurl the wine at the wall, to demand the truth right then and there. Instead, I smiled with the same practiced charm he so often wielded and pretended not to notice. That night, I made love to him with a fury I hadn't known I possessed, as though reclaiming territory that had been trespassed. He kissed me with passion, but beneath it I tasted lies. Days turned into weeks, and the unease grew heavier. He came home late, smelled of perfume I didn't own, carried stories stitched together with careless thread. I wanted to believe him, I truly did. Love has a way of making U.S. architects of our own delusions. Then I met Daniel. He arrived at one of my charity galas, a guest of a friend, tall and enigmatic, with eyes that saw through the surface straight into marrow. Where Adrian's charm was polished, Daniel's presence was raw, almost dangerous. He didn't flatter me with rehearsed compliments. Instead, he asked about my solitude, about whether wealth ever felt like a cage. No one had ever dared to speak to me that way. I should have turned away. I should have honored vows I had once believed unbreakable. Yet when his hand brushed mine under the candlelit table, an electric pulse surged through me, igniting something Adrian's touch had long dulled. I excused myself early from the event, but Daniel followed me into the cool night air. We stood beneath a marble archway, shadows cloaking us from prying eyes. His lips found mine before words could stop them. I told myself it was only a kiss, only a slip, only a moment stolen in weakness. But the truth was simpler. I wanted him, and I no longer cared about restraint. From that night onward, guilt became my companion, tangled with excitement so potent it nearly choked me. By day, I was Adrian's wife, the picture of composure, the elegant woman hosting dinners and smiling through charades. By night, I was Daniel's secret, unraveling in his arms, discovering parts of myself I had forgotten existed. Adrian thought he was the only one skilled in betrayal. He was wrong. Balancing my double life became an art form. By daylight, I was the devoted wife, dressed in elegance, hosting fundraisers, laughing at Adrian's jokes, and pretending his hand on my waist still meant something. By night, I belonged to Daniel. His apartment was a world away from the marble halls I called home, bare brick walls, unpolished wooden floors, the faint scent of tobacco and paint. It was raw, imperfect, real. And in that imperfection, I felt alive. Daniel didn't care about the zeros in my bank account. He cared about the way my voice cracked when I admitted my loneliness, about the scars I carried from years of being seen as a prize instead of a person. With him, I was not an heiress, not a trophy, not a financial conquest. I was simply a woman, wanted for the heat in her veins and the softness of her skin. His hunger for me was relentless, and I matched it with my own, reckless in a way I had never dared before. Meanwhile, Adrian grew bolder in his deceit. He came home reeking of luxury hotels, his excuses stitched together with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. He bought cars he didn't need, watches he didn't wear, suits that never left their bags. Bills piled up on accounts I hadn't touched, and when I questioned him, he brushed me aside with laughter. "Investment, darling," he would say, eyes glinting with something colder than love. "You wouldn't understand." But I did understand. He was draining me. Slowly, carefully, as if siphoning life from my veins without spilling a single drop. At first, I fought the urge to confront him. Rage surged inside me, but so did fear. Fear that I would lose everything I had built if I dared to sever the bond. My fortune wasn't just money. It was legacy, my father's empire, my shield against a world eager to consume me. I couldn't risk letting Adrian dismantle it piece by piece. It was Daniel who steadied me. Lying in his bed, his arms tangled around me, I whispered my suspicions, my anger, my helplessness. He listened, silent at first, then finally said, "If he thinks he's smarter than you, let him keep thinking it. Men like him always hang themselves if you hand them enough rope." The idea rooted itself in me like a seed. I stopped fighting Adrian's lies. I smiled, nodded, played the part of the oblivious wife. And in the shadows, I began collecting threads, bank statements, hotel receipts, whispered rumors from staff who had seen too much. I built a tapestry of his betrayal, each piece tucked away carefully, each detail a weapon waiting for the right moment. Adrian thought he was the predator, circling me with his schemes. He didn't realize I was sharpening my claws in silence. 2 lives, 2 lovers, 2 secrets spinning dangerously close to collision. The only question was which truth would surface first, mine or his. The day Adrian finally showed his hand, I wasn't surprised. I had been waiting for it, bracing myself for the inevitable strike. The papers arrived in a thick white envelope, delivered by a nervous courier who couldn't quite meet my eyes. Divorce. Alongside it, an audacious demand, half of my fortune. Not a settlement, not a negotiation, but a declaration, as though my inheritance, my empire, my very name, could be carved in two with the stroke of a pen. I read the documents in silence, my pulse steady. Somewhere, I expected rage to boil, grief to overwhelm me. Instead, I laughed. A sharp, brittle sound that echoed through my empty study. Adrian had overplayed his game. He thought me blind, weak, so consumed by love that I would stumble willingly into his trap. He didn't realize that while he was busy seducing secretaries and draining accounts, I was building an arsenal. That night, I met Daniel at our hidden refuge. He poured me whiskey, his gaze steady as I handed him the papers. He read them, his jaw tightening. "He underestimates you," Daniel said. "That's his mistake. Use it." "I intend to," I replied, sliding open the drawer of his desk to reveal the growing file I had been compiling. Receipts, forged signatures, falsified business reports, each document proof of Adrian's greed. I had even uncovered evidence of his offshore accounts, cleverly concealed but not clever enough. Every lie he thought invisible was now preserved in ink and paper. We spent hours sifting through it all, Daniel and I shoulder to shoulder, conspirators in love and revenge. For the first time, I felt not like a victim but like an executioner sharpening her blade. Adrian's arrogance had handed me the weapon I needed. When I returned home, Adrian was waiting. He stood in the living room with a glass of brandy, his smile smug, his confidence radiating like cheap cologne. "You've received the documents, I assume," he said. I nodded, masking the fury beneath calm composure. "Yes." "Good. Don't make this difficult. You'll walk away with enough to keep your dresses and parties. I'll handle the rest. You'll be free." His voice was rehearsed, almost bored, as though I were an obstacle already overcome. I wanted to scream, to slap the arrogance from his face. Instead, I smiled. "Of course, Adrian. I'll let the courts decide." For a fleeting moment, doubt flickered in his eyes. Then it vanished, swallowed by his own self-assurance. He had no idea the trap was already closing around him. The next morning, I prepared the envelope. A simple manila folder, unassuming, yet heavy with the weight of his sins. I sealed it carefully, pressing the flap down with deliberate finality. Inside lay everything, every lie, every theft, every betrayal immortalized in black and white. When the court date arrived, I walked into the grand chamber, not as a scorned wife, but as a strategist ready to dismantle her opponent. Adrian strode in, confident, certain of victory. He had no idea that his empire of deceit was about to crumble with a single laugh from the judge. The courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and dust, a stage dressed in solemnity, but I walked its halls with a calm certainty. Adrian strode ahead of me, chest puffed, his attorney whispering final strategies into his ear. He didn't look back, didn't see the faint curve of my lips or the steel in my eyes. He believed today was his coronation, not realizing it would be his public undoing. Inside the chamber, the judge presided with weary dignity, spectacles perched low on his nose. Lawyers shuffled papers, clerks tapped at keyboards, and the gallery buzzed with low murmurs. Adrian sat beside his counsel, exuding arrogance. He glanced at me once, offering a smirk that spoke of victory already claimed. His attorney opened with a grand performance, describing Adrian as a man wronged, a husband denied partnership in the wealth of his wife's empire. Words like sacrifice and entitlement filled the air, carefully chosen to paint him as both victim and equal. I listened silently, my hands folded, my face unreadable. When it was my turn, I stood. My attorney rose as well, but I placed a hand on his arm and shook my head. I wanted this moment for myself. The judge raised an eyebrow, surprised but permitting. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady, clear. "I have here an envelope. Inside lies the truth of my husband's actions, not the story spun for your ears today." I walked forward, each step deliberate, and set the manila folder on the bench before the judge. His brow furrowed as he opened it, pulling out the neat stack of documents. Bank transfers to offshore accounts, forged signatures, falsified contracts, receipts for luxury hotels under assumed names. For a moment, silence thickened the air. Then, the judge let out a short, incredulous laugh. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head slowly. "Mr. Blackwood," he said to Adrian, "I suggest you take a look at your wife's submission before we continue." Adrian's face drained of color. He snatched at the papers, rifling through them with frantic hands. His lips moved soundlessly, as if he couldn't comprehend the evidence staring back at him. The gallery erupted in whispers, and even his lawyer's composure faltered, sweat beading at his temple. The judge's voice cut through the commotion. "It appears, sir, that you have not only attempted to mislead this court, but you have also engaged in fraudulent financial behavior that may warrant criminal investigation." He chuckled again, a sound almost cruel in its amusement. "And you wanted half her fortune? Consider yourself fortunate if you walk out today with your freedom." Adrian looked at me then, really looked, no longer smug, no longer certain. His eyes burned with fury, shame, disbelief. I met his gaze without blinking, my expression calm, almost serene. In that instant the balance shifted. The predator had become prey, and the courtroom had witnessed his fall. When the gavel struck, it echoed like thunder in my chest. The court adjourned, but the sound lingered, sealing the end of Adrian's reign over my life. He sat slumped at the defendant's table, a man stripped bare, the weight of his own greed crushing him. His lawyer avoided his eyes, already calculating how to distance himself from a sinking ship. I stood, gathering my things with deliberate grace, and walked past him without a word. For the first time, he did not follow. Outside, the air was sharp and cool, carrying the scent of rain. The sky stretched wide above me, and for the first time in years, I felt its vastness. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, voices clawed for soundbites. I ignored them all, stepping into my car with the silence of a queen who needed no explanation. Back at the mansion, I wandered through the rooms, touching the polished furniture, the gilded frames, the silk curtains. This house had once felt like a stage for my marriage, every corner echoing with laughter I had convinced myself was real. Now it was mine again, unburdened, unclaimed. Wealth no longer felt like chains clinking at my wrists, it felt like freedom waiting to be wielded. That night I returned to Daniel. He opened the door with his usual steady calm, but when he saw the light in my eyes, his lips curved into a smile. We didn't speak at first. He pulled me into his arms, and I melted against him, the world outside dissolving into nothing. He was not a perfect man, not polished like Adrian, not hungry for show. He was raw, flawed, but real. In his embrace, I was not an asset or a conquest. I was simply myself, desired, cherished, liberated. Yet even in his warmth, I knew something undeniable. I had changed. Betrayal had hardened me, lust had awakened me, revenge had sharpened me. I was no longer the woman who had walked blindly into a ballroom, dazzled by a charming smile. I was something stronger, something dangerous. Lying in Daniel's bed, I thought about the path that had brought me here. Adrian's touch, once electric, had turned into chains. His lies had pushed me into another man's arms, but his greed had freed me from illusion. The envelope, so simple in its appearance, had been my sword, slicing through his web of deceit. The judge's laughter still rang in my memory, a sound that marked not only Adrian's downfall but my rebirth. I had watched a man who believed himself invincible crumble in front of a room full of strangers. And I had walked away untouched, wealth intact, heart still burning. Now I stand at the edge of something new. Freedom tastes like smoke and whiskey, like the heat of Daniel's kiss, like the cool night air against my skin. I am no longer afraid of desire, betrayal, or even loss. I have lived through them all, and I have emerged victorious. When my husband tried to steal half my fortune, I gave the judge an envelope. And he laughed at him. But I laughed last.